Welcome to my shop. I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you. Today we're going to build a cake stand. If you can see, it's a fancy, nice A cake stand. You get what I'm saying. So I made this 5 years ago for my wife. She loves it. We pull it out all the time. Anytime someone's over, it's got cookies, cakes. It's seen everything. It's actually kind of gross. It's got like icing still on it and stuff. But our friend Michelle came to our house and loved this. So let's just make her one and surprise her with it. We're not going to make it out of walnut because I don't have walnut right now, but I do have this board of cherry. So let's get into it. We got to mill up a bunch of pieces, measure, see what we need to glue together, and then let it dry. It'll probably be tomorrow. Then we'll throw it on the lathe and turn it all. Let's rock and roll. It's been a few years since I last built this cake stand, so here I'm taking some measurements to get a good game plan. Now I'm not planning on making an exact copy of this one, but it just gives us a good starting point going forward. Here I'm measuring out all of my parts on the board before I even start. It's one of the simplest tips that can save you from using more wood that you wanted to. Luckily, this cake stand doesn't actually take too much wood to build. We won't use even half of this board, so it's awesome because we'll have a half of a cherry board to use another time. I'm rough cutting parts on the miter and table saw to make some glue ups. This cherry board isn't terribly wide, so none of the parts of our cake stands can be made from the starting dimension of that board. So we need to make some glue ups. So we're making 3 different parts here. It's the top, the middle spindle, and the base. The first board we're cutting down will make up the spindle and the base glue ups, and the second board is for the top. We'll pull out the planer to plane down the top portion because it's a little thick and it'll save us some time later on the lathe. Alright, so here's where we go. This is stuff for the top. These are 2 pieces for the base. And this is 2 pieces for that. So what we need to do, cut this guy in half, glue it up. Just glue a bunch of stuff up, you know. Top, that's the base, and that's the middle spindle. All right, we got everything ready to go to the lathe. We'll sand a little bit on some of these, and then we'll get going. We're going to make the base of the cake stand first. So mark out the rough size of the base with some calipers, and then cut off the corners to save some time on the lathe. Next, I attach what is called the faceplate. Attach it with some short screws, and then you'll notice the top part is a threaded piece that will screw directly onto the lathe. This type of chuck is somewhat frowned upon in the turning world because it leaves holes from the screws when you're finished, but you can fill those in later, and this is the bottom of the piece, and frankly, I don't care. The first thing you do when you start a piece on the lathe is to rough it out, which means I take a piece with edges and I turn it down into something that is cylindrical and smooth. So it'll just be a circle. I do all this with a bowl gouge. Next, I make a line slightly below center where I'm going to start my cut in. You take each cut slow and then you start working towards the shape that you want. I'm pretty much copying the shape of the original cake stand here. It's a relatively easy shape, a concave groove on the top, and a slight back angle on the bottom. Here, I flattened the top of the piece. It's not that necessary, but I had some glue staining that would have been tough to sand out. Also, over here, just notice how I check for flatness with the straight edge. It was a real game changer for me when I figured that out. After some sanding and removing the screw chuck, we are on to the next portion, which is the spindle. Off camera, I cut the ends of this glue up to give me a flat surface to work with. I use a combination square and mark from each edge, which gives me a center location that I can use a punch and make a little hole for my spur drives and stuff for the lathe. Now we are going to be doing some turning in between centers, also known as spindle turning, which is my favorite. In this type of turning, you have a piece of wood between the headstock of the lathe and the tailstock. I'm roughing out the piece with a tool called a roughing gouge, which is this huge 2-inch wide thing that takes off a lot of material quickly. It's a lot of fun, but it kind of hurts too. Those wood chips are flying off into my hand very fast. I use a parting tool to set my top and bottom dimensions. You'll notice I leave small sections on the top and bottom that will be used as tenons to join the whole cake stand together, but we'll get into that later. You can see I've made some marks on the spindle to set an outline for how I was going to turn this. Now I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here. I've done this enough where it usually works out, but these lines help get a rough shape started. Then I just go where I think the shape needs to go. Spindle turning is what I suggest for beginners to start with. Most people will try to start with a bowl or something, which is no easy task. There's a lot of complex angles and dangerous situations in bowl turning, but spindles can be pretty easy and it's relatively safe. And after sanding, we take the piece off and move on to the Big Daddy. As you can see, this is the same method we did for the base earlier. We measure out our rough circle, cut the edges off, and attach the face plate with screws. Cutting the edges off is more important here because we have to make this big boy fit on the lathe. I have a 12-inch swing on my lathe, which means the biggest piece that I can fit on there is 12 inches in diameter. This was closer than I thought it would be, but we barely got by. Turning something big like this is a challenge because the outside is spinning way faster than the inside. So when you're roughing out the outside, those wood chips are flying at you so fast, they kind of hurt, honestly. But as you push towards the center, you can even get way slow where your chisel doesn't even cut very well and you have to turn up the speed of your lathe. So it's a bit of a balancing act between the two, and you kind of learn to fill it out as you go. But it's something you learn the more and more you do it. I start the detail work by turning the back side or the bottom of the top. I take a lot of material off here to try to create a look that makes the top thin, but then the center is still thick enough so that we can create a mortise in it later. Next, I create a groove here just to fit like a standard 10-inch glass dome. I use a skew and a parting tool to do this. And finally, I flatten the top, do some sanding, and remove the piece from the lathe. After removing the faceplate, I sand the bottom of the top and we move on to making the mortises for assembly. I use a 3/4 inch Forstner bit and I drill a hole in the center of the top and the base. If you remember earlier, we made 2 tenons on our spindle. They fit perfectly into those mortises that we just drilled, and then all that is left is to add glue. I throw on some weight and some clamps, and then we wait overnight for the glue to dry. It's done. It's basically done. We've got it sanded, all the cracks filled, glue that's squeezed out, cleaned up. We got it all ready to go. We just need to put some finish on it. We're going to do cutting board conditioner. It'll be interesting to see because we got a lot of hardwood. So this a lot of hardwood with a little bit of sapwood, and the sapwood won't change colors as much as the hardwood. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Here I'm using a cutting board conditioner that I made. It's a mixture of mineral oil and beeswax that is completely food safe. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we get to those final shots, I wanted to ask if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're brand new to this YouTube thing, so those two things would really help us out. Also, bear with me as I figure this YouTube thing out. I'm pretty competent as a woodworker, but as a YouTuber, filming, making videos, all new to me. I don't know anything about sound design, editing, anything, So bear with us as we figure that out. But we got a bunch of cool projects in the works already. So you'll want to subscribe to stick around with us. Let's get to those final shots. And I think I need a cookie.
I should have dressed differently. I knew I was going to be on camera.
You're good.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,